I must admit, I don't think I've ever had to moderate moderators before, but I'd just like to also amplify a little bit about what Erin said about the ISS. Having been in the industry a little bit longer than her and on Earth a little bit longer than her as well, ISS was the very first organization that I joined when I started my land-based career after many years at sea. And short and sweet, I can tell you that ISS has been by far the most positive influence on my very long and varied career. I've done fantastic things with companies all over the world, and I've always been associated with ISS, and it's all about the company you keep. And one of my business philosophies is that the easiest way to succeed is always go straight to the top. And by that, I mean, deal with the top level person that you can in every single business that you want to do business with. And one of the best ways to meet those people, to be able to call up the CEO or the COO or the owner or whatever it is to join ISS, because you have a chance to meet those people in many different situations, work with them, volunteering for the good of the industry. And I promise you, it's something that is really good for your career. Among the many other things we do with ISS is a variety of different educational opportunities all over the world. And this is just one of them. And I thank you all for coming here. And I really look forward to this discussion, because we have a lot of issues that are obviously important to the industry, because we've been able to discuss them more than once. So Pete, am I handing this off to, well, the very first one happens to be, in the interest of full disclosure, I work closely with Corey Ranslam here with Dryad Global, absolutely fantastic company. Involved in risk management and cybersecurity, and I will allow Corey to tell you about the seminar that he is leading here.
Thank you. I'd like to get up and move around. We're excited about this. This is really part 2 of a seminar. If you were there in Monaco, fire safety is a very big topic of interest in this industry. We have some phenomenal panelists who are going to be a part of that today, and how we kind of structure this to make this with audience participation, because I know a lot of people in the room with industry folks, captain and crew, have a lot of questions. So the way we did this in Monaco, I think, worked out really well, where we gave the panelists a chance to talk a little bit for just a couple of minutes on their background and experience, and then really start to jump into questions from the room. And I know that we'll have a lot of questions. Norma is the moderator of the moderators, because we need to be moderated and kept on time. Otherwise, we would probably let the panel go on for a couple of hours, and obviously we want to get to the drinks time of it. So we appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy schedule to be a part of this. And I think in the industry, the way we solve these issues is to get the experts across the board around the room behind these issues to look for the solutions that are going to work best and the safest for the industry. So with that, I'm going to start out, and not necessarily in order, but today we have experts in insurance, in the operational side, in the regulatory side, in the detection and suppression side when it comes to fire safety on board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out, I'm going to give the microphone to Mike, and then from there pass between the panelists. And if you guys, like we talked about, just give a couple of minutes on your background and really the importance of why you do what you do related to the topic of fire safety.
Thank you. So again, my name is Mike Pavlik. My company is Frankentech Yacht Security and Awareness Systems. For many years, we've been providing onboard security in terms of access control and monitoring of all the decks. And in the past few years, we've expanded that to provide security for asset tracking and threat detection offboard. In years past, we had a land-based company, and we installed many systems for fire protection that uses different technology than what you're currently used to on many of the yachts. So we decided to introduce these technologies into the yachting industry for monitoring not only lithium-ion battery fires, but for other types of fires and systems too. So I think I'm going to pass the mic down and let the next person explain what they do, and then we'll get back to those technologies as to exactly what they are. My name is Robert Ellis. My company is Seafire Marine. I work for. Been in business for 60 years. We specialize in clean agent fire suppression. Around 5 years ago, we began receiving more and more inquiries related to what do you have from fire suppression related to lithium batteries. And the answer was nothing. Nobody really does. We can build you something, but it's not going to be cost effective and really practical. But the level increase that we kept receiving, we realized and we could see that trend as the technology was getting more and more integrated into the marine sector. And it was getting more and more integrated into the marine sector. So we took it as an initiative that we needed to come up and find solutions for the industry to help with a significant fire issue, because conventional fire suppression does not adequately address lithium battery fires.
Before we go any further, I have a question that other people have asked me, and I'd like to throw it to you guys because you're the professionals in abatement of fire issues with Li-ion batteries, which I probably say directly in Monaco. Are there indeed more Li-ion fires happening, not just on yachts, but around the world, or is it all just pipe?
It's not pipe, but listen, I don't want to be an alarmist here, okay? The reality is the industry has done a phenomenal job of improving lithium battery fires from when they were first created. When they were first created and launched, there were more issues related to fires. It's just you had a less volume of lithium batteries out there. So lots of improvements have been made from a manufacturing standpoint. Lots of improvements have been made, to eliminate manufacturing defect. Lots of improvements have been made on the battery management system. So batteries today, lithium batteries, are a lot safer than they were. The situation is that everybody now has them. So when before you might have been talking about hundreds of millions of cells out there, you're now talking about hundreds of billions of cells out there because the technology is everywhere. We're not just talking about the technology in your propulsion or your non-running, backup power. Okay, the technology is coming on to your vessels. So the crew, the owner, the management company can do everything correct, but there can still be a risk by what somebody else might bring on that boat. Okay, and like I said, because there's more out there, the percentage of incidents related to lithium cells has decreased significantly. But because see, I did that on purpose for comedy relief. See, I told you they can malfunction. But because there's so many more, even though you decrease the fraction of that percent down further, the risk is actually greater now today. And the manufacturers can do everything right. What the manufacturers cannot control is what happens when they're out in the field. Whether they're abused, whether through damage, puncture, from it heating, from being mischarged. A lot of people, you put a lot of focus and money on the vessel, but when it comes to what charger you use, if you with multiple different using the wrong charger can result in the overcharging. or can result in short circuit on the battery.
I thought it was just marketing from Apple to make you buy another charger.
Well, again, the goal here is not to be an alarmist. It is to just level set everybody and realize that lithium batteries are different, this technology, than other fuel and energy sources that we're using. And there are some challenges from a fire protection standpoint that the fire protection industry is struggling to catch up with to the technology, very similar to how regulation, like today, there is no regulation on lithium battery fires suppression. There is no standard really out there to evaluate. And part of that was because it has been a challenge to identify solutions. You know, it's difficult to evaluate a solution, you know, when you don't have options to come up with a standard to evaluate solutions. So that's improving.
Yes, me. That's me. Is it? Yeah, it's me. It used to be him, now it's me. Peter Southgate, I was the regional director. I'm not just a board member, I'm regional director Americas for the Maritime Authority. And as Robert says, you know, we have the regulatory responsibility. I'm too close. Sorry. I'll leave the room. No, so we have the challenge of regulating these systems, and you know, I think this session is about fire safety, and yes, we're focusing very much on lithium-ion batteries, but I think it's important to stress that fires are not lithium-ion batteries are not the only thing that catches fire on yachts. So we have to remember that, and again, not to be alarmist. Whilst we have a good handle on fire safety regulations, the code and the conventions have very good standards for fire safety. Lithium-ion batteries are perhaps they're new kids on the block, so to speak, and we're still developing the technologies and the methodologies to cope with them. So as you may be aware, MGN 681 was a draft guidance note which was published by the UK MCA late last year for consultation. Still only in draft form. It's not without its challenges. I can go into it. I don't want to dominate the mic, but I can go into that in a bit more detail on what those challenges are and how that's going to impact on design. But that's my initial introduction, and I'll pass over to Richard.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, as Pete said, we've posted the background. So I'm at the sea for a few years, worked for Lloyd's, worked for Carnival, ended up through not listening and not putting my hand down when everyone else did, being working for Cayman. Did 10 years at Cayman as a director out of the UK, and then joined Dual Yachts 7 years ago. I'm now the managing director for Dual Yachts. We look after a fleet of about shy of 100 yachts again now, thanks to what's happened in the world, but we're growing again. Yeah, so absolutely to echo what everyone said thus far, not to repeat it. Yes, there is no technology out there that's been approved by numerous flag states, the MVGL, Lloyd's Register, True Fuel Classification Society, with regards to how they can tackle or deal with lithium-ion fires. Yes, we're still using SOLAS regulations to, or transposing the large yacht code for structural fire protection, about where we put A60. Sorry if I'm using phrases that people aren't aware of, I don't know the experience in the room. So we put fire type bulkhead and such things in certain places. And are they the most appropriate when we look at where lithium-ion batteries are distributed in the boat? Perhaps not. But it doesn't mean that we can't capture the low-hanging fruit. Speaking as a yacht manager, we are quite busy trying to offer some sort of best practice and some training and some just, I would say, common sense, but it's not that common, into the yachts that we're lucky enough to help, to look at where these risks are. And instead, there are sort of three types of batteries. There are the batteries, the lithium-ion batteries that are for peak shaving or part of the ship propulsion, those sorts of things. Then you've got the batteries which are inbuilt into things like a sea bob or a jet ski, those sorts of issues there. There's a different level of, a different set of risks and countermeasures you can put in place to look after them, where they're being kept, how they're being charged, the fact that they're more in the marine environment, they're getting wet, etc., etc., etc. And then there's as we said, the 1,000,001 iPhones, Samsung Galaxies. There are other, BBC would say there are other providers in the world, iPads and other such things. distributed around the boat, and where are they being kept? And we've seen all sorts of weird and wonderful arrangements. We've seen we have a yacht we took on recently where the captain had been told by the management company to charge that no mobile phones were to be charged in cabins and all the rest of it, and they were all to be kept and charged in the crew mess, which means in the corner of the crew mess there is a cat's knitting of spaghetti of extension leads and more plugs and adapters than you could possibly imagine, and a pile of lithium-ion batteries and people's mobile phones waiting to catch fire in a space that has absolutely no structural fire protection to keep it safe from the rest of the boat. So perhaps not the most logical, brilliant decision ever made in the world, but it's those sorts of things that, whilst we're waiting for the technology to catch up, the regulation to catch up, and other things built in, that we can start looking at and thinking, actually, is that a good idea? Perhaps we shouldn't. Anyway, I'll pass it on.
Thanks. I'm Laura Sherrod, and I worked for the other Lloyd's, not the register. And I've been in the yacht insurance business for 35 years, and I've never seen anything like what we're facing right now, as far as carriers being very, very nervous about fire for good reason. And what we have to realize is it's not just lithium ion. It's many, many, many different causes, and we don't always get what the actual cause is. And I love the fact that we have a panel here and a lot of discussion and many, many panels talking about lithium ion. And I'm just going to tell us a little story. I had a boss who would come in with all kinds of different ideas all the time. And so I had to kind of come up with a coping mechanism. And I would sit there and listen to him talk, and I used the 10-second rule. I would sit there and count to 10 after he finished talking to decide if he was actually telling me what he really wanted or if he was just going to pass along and go on to something else. And so 1,001, 1,002, 1,000. And I'm sure he thought he was an idiot, right? Because, you know, why am I sitting there just doing nothing? But basically, if it's an important idea, it will stay around. And Herb and a lot of people have been working on putting together the proper information in coming up with very good ideas about how to manage this. But I want to also say, again, it's not all about lithium ion batteries that we've been having these fires. And a person who's in this audience here, and actually we have a whole insurance section behind me. Raise your hand. Yeah, but we, and the MarineMax representative as well. So just to talk about this, and these statistics came from 2018. It takes a long time to come up with these statistics because we don't always know where the fires emanate from, and we don't get really good information when it's at the bottom of the ocean. So these were extrapolated from the 2018 fires. There were 39 fires on yachts over 30 meters in 2018 alone. Think about that for a moment. And the majority of the fire losses occurred in either the USA or Italy, 10 in USA, 9 in Italy. Of 39, 11 of the 39 fires occurred in the month of August. 14 of the 39 fires were on vessels while in shipyards. 29 of the 39 fires were on vessels below 40 meters. 29 of the 39 fires were on vessels 10 years or older. 32 of the 39 fires were on vessels below 500 gross tons. 23 of the 39 fires were on vessels with fiberglass hull. And 37 of the 39 fires were on motor yachts. So just to kind of give you some statistical things to think about, we are very concerned about the aging of vessels in insurance because, and I'd ask anybody here to start talking about that as well. But bringing these toys aboard is a big issue. Lithium ion is a big issue, but the management and the maintenance of our yachts, I think, is one of the most important things that insurers think about. So
Laura, why do you think that by far the greatest amount of these fires have been on motor yachts rather than sailing yachts? Does that mean let's go to sailing?
And Norma, I would say that's probably because sailboats don't have as much stuff on board. And I don't know. I mean, I'd ask for the fire experts to answer that.
I'd say the result of the fact there are more motor yachts than there are sailing yachts. Why not?
There might be a
It's just a case that there are 95 motor yachts built by sailing yachts. So there's a ratio there, no cycling.
Usually as a good moderator, you have to have questions stuffed in your pocket. This session you don't, so. Mr. Ruffalo.
Laura, you may have said it, I may have missed it, but of those 39, how many were crewed versus uncrewed?
Well, they're all over 30 meters. So I'm assuming they were all crewed. But all, of the 14 that were in shipyards at the time, what was the status of the crew at that point? And yeah. Was the shipyard in marinas in the shipyard or actually like on the water type work? That's a good question. I think most of them were having work done. But having work done, I'm getting the confirmation from the first director information.
She has someone in her ear. Yeah.
Yes.
Herb?
No, I can tell you by backing it up. They were out of service, some on the water, some on the hard, work being done by crew and by our personnel at the combination. But it wasn't really just a boat turned over for the yard. A combination involvement on both sides.
Yes. Yeah, and subcontractors is a major issue we face as well, because the quality and the of subcontractors involved in what we're seeing every day is scary for underwriters to make decisions, because I mean they can take it into LMC, but LMC is not actually going to work. It's those subs that have the terms.
Question right here.
Particularly beyond the lithium battery side, the conversions to me is sort of a concern of an underwriter going from 220 to 110 in the United States. Who's doing the work? What's the age of the vessel? What was the work from the get-go? I mean, nobody in this room should be surprised. You'd be frightened, but we know that there's boat builders that are staple gunning wiring behind the joiner. What's the quality of the manuals when the boats come to a U.S. yard? Who's doing the work? Always a big concern.
They're going to get suspicious. I just keep walking down. Everybody can ask questions. It's totally open forum.
I just wonder also if you have the statistic on, of those fires, were they the batteries in place on the vessels that started the fire, or was it this, or do we have a breakdown of what was the source of the fire?
So it's very hard for there to be
Yeah, there's not a lot of good information about where fire occurs unless there's a report from one of the organizations that Peter manages. And so most of the insurance information that we get is secondhand and sometimes not complete when it comes to fire. True. We keep hearing sea bombs and things like that.
Right. I mean, as Richie said, there's different types of battery system. I mean, you have removable batteries, you have devices that don't have removable batteries, you have portable devices that talk at you when you're in the middle of a panel session and things like that. So it's impossible to say, but I think to get to the bottom of it is to identify, the seed of the fire. Where was it mechanical damage? Was it on charge? we've had issues with batteries that are not even on charge, that have been mechanically damaged. That can, so it doesn't necessarily mean the spaghetti junction thing that Richie mentioned. That sounds like a recipe for disaster for me, but that might not necessarily be the root cause. But the simple fact is there are numerous combinations that could result in a fire. Just incidentally, with the carriage of a vehicle with a lithium-ion battery is actually a dangerous good, and it is actually listed under the IMDG code as a dangerous good. So it has to be. So when you cannot remove the battery from the vehicle, it's actually listed as a dangerous good, and ideally should be carried in accordance with the IMDG code. I mentioned the MGN 681. That there is an exception for that is if it's carried in an approved vehicle space. So if you think about a ro-ro deck, which is an approved vehicle carriage space, in that situation you would be exempt from having to comply with the IMDG requirements. But that's so I think again, storage is a key factor. But until we can gather more data, it's and maybe Mike and Robert can go into a bit further onto fire initiation and root cause. But until we can establish a common pattern in terms of whether it's a boost battery, whether it's a fixed battery, whether it's mechanical damage, whether it's charging, then we're not going to get a pinpoint.
One more thing from an operational standpoint. It's also, I was in a very interesting discussion a little while ago, only via Teams or Zoom or whatever it's called, and there was a guy there from the US Fire Service in one of the cities, and he said they had to adopt their program, how they go into buildings, how they deal with fires, because so many people, even someone in California, so some people had segways and things like that, which are parked next to their front door and plugged in for charging, and they put it out, and then they go on into the building to try and rescue whoever's been left in there. Give me the cat, let's hope. And the Segway reignites and burns through the hoses, and now there's 2 or 3 firefighters in the building on air. The building's on fire, and they've got no water, they've got no hose, no water. And so they've had to adapt what they do to fight the fires there. And I hadn't even thought, I'll put my hands up until I heard that story. I hadn't even thought about the fact that we've been talking about what we can do to stop fires, or how we're going, what we're going to do in these sorts of situations, and what technology there is out there, even though it's not approved. But then it brought home to me, actually, we should also be training the teams on board for the different risks they now face, regardless of whether the fire sergeant came back. If every fire that started was Ryan, have I just stolen your thunder? Sorry, every fire may not start with batteries, but if the batteries are there, they add a different dynamic to the risk being faced by the team that's fighting. And that needs training, and you're not going to get it right every time, but if you can train people and apply some common sense, you're another step closer to make sure it will be.
All right, question here, there.
Mine is basically, could you tell us your time frame of how things, you said there's a draft in place, that your proposal out there, a procedure. Can you educate us on how long it takes from the research to be developed to having a solution for us to follow?
The consultation closed in November, so the comments are being reviewed. I would imagine, I don't have an exact time frame, but I would imagine it would be pretty soon. But it does have some significant recommendations from anything from 500 watt hours, so half a kilowatt. That's a very small battery. So if you think the average toy is something like 50 kilowatt hours, so you're talking about a lot of batteries. But no, the exact time frame I can't say, but it will be soon. No, because again, I think because we have fairly established fire requirements anyway. I mean, fires still happen, as Laura's alluded to, but the regulations, the SOLAS chapter 2.2 of SOLAS has fire pretty much settled down. I mean, it's more to do with passive fire protection and active fire suppression, because it recognises that fires are always going to happen. There's no way you can prevent fires. That's just the nature of the beast. So you prevent the fire doing more damage than it needs to be, and by firstly using passive fire protection and then using active fire suppression to put the fire out. So you're always going to deal with that. But lithium ion, I think, has a specific issue that it cannot be, and I'll let Robert and Mike to deal with that, but cannot be extinguished. Well, it can be extinguished, but it's very difficult to extinguish using regular extinguishing medium.
That was a question that was asked by Rob Moss.
Yeah.
Very kind of hearing this morning, which I think everybody was interested in, which is how do you put those fires out?
Well,
Sorry, Mike.
we have two people on the panel, so.
I'm on the opposite side of detecting it before it begins, although Robert and I both share some thoughts on the type of suppression formulas that should be used, but since this is more his forte, I'll let you handle that question. There are different methods that can be used. Some are more practical than others. Okay? If right now, if you look at NFPA, they will tell you throw a lot of water. Okay? Throw a lot of water. That's what they will tell you.
Like throw it in the water.
No. What I mean is pour a lot of water in it. When I say a lot of water, I mean a real lot of water. Because the big issue here of why these batteries are a problem is a process called thermal runaway. Okay, and thermal runaway, the best way to think about it is it's a chain reaction that kind of self-perpetuates. Okay, it's not quite the same, but if we all probably remember back to long time school days where they take in, put the mouse traps with all the ping pong balls, and someone throws one in, and they all start in, the whole room goes off. Thermal runaway is where one cell, once it starts to get heated, okay, it expands. When it expands, that heat that it generates affects the cells around it, which also expands, okay, in heat. And it just keeps going until that heat and the various gases that it give off ignite. All right, so that's the issue with that is that you can put out the flame or smother the flame. You have not suppressed really the fire because more than likely it's going to come back. It's going to reflash. And the thing is, it could reflash in seconds, minutes, hours. I've heard situations of days. Okay, so because of that, it gives a false sense of oh we got the flames. If you're lucky enough to get them out. So that's what the real challenge is that you're dealing not just with that external, but that internal reaction that's going on. And there are challenges to it as to, how successful fire suppression can be based off of where that thermal runaway occurred in the battery. All right, you're going to have greater luck trying to put it out if that thermal runaway is occurring more towards the surface, okay, versus if it's more in the center, because the secret to putting these fires out is you've got to pull the heat out, right? You're going to have greater luck pulling the heat out, the closer it is to the surface, right? Because that's where, as it's further deeper in the battery, it's a lot tougher challenge. Yeah. So accessibility is very important when it comes to putting these types of fires out. From the standpoint of the different things that you can use, like I said, beyond water, I dealt with somebody that actually they used earth. They actually had a lithium battery that was at a recycling place that was about 4 foot by 4 foot, and someone accidentally hit it, and their only way of extinguishing that at the time was they dug a hole, dropped it in, covered it up, and for a long, long time. All right. So there are different solutions. That's not necessarily, but that solution, like something like that, would not be practical in the yacht, right? Yeah, right. You're not going to dig a hole. And, you know, and the other, right, correct. And you know what? What else is not practical is you're in a vessel. Yes, vessel is made to be on the water, but that doesn't mean putting the volume of water that you need to suppress a lithium battery fire in, on board that vessel is a safe situation. Okay, so those type of solutions are immediately, off the board. What I can tell you is that we have developed, working with a company with an agent that actually that addresses the thermal runaway. Now, for it to be, like I said, for your success on addressing it, it really gets down to accessibility. So there's things that, that really can be done ahead of time to improve the ability to put that fire out. Whether it's layout, various passive things that can be done. The goal is you want to try and be as proactive as possible, all right, to implement a full fire safety plan in there, where you have your preventative up front, you have your detection, all right, so when there is an issue, I'm going to get there. I know. I want to tell everybody about it. You're going to. So
we may just take the whole entire afternoon. Just kidding.
So listen, I can get up here and I can talk about this for hours. There's a very passion here, because this is something, it's real, that we need to take into account and realize that we got to put things in place. This technology isn't going away anytime soon.
I think, and it's a whole solution too. I mean, the suppression is really one small part of that. You have the detection, you have the other pieces that you need to put in place. So the suppression, you hope you never get to that piece, because with the lithium ion, that's a last ditch effort at that point. It's like we're probably going to end up abandoning ship because of this deal.
Well, Peter said here, your goal is you're going to put as much of that preventative, passive up front as you can. But the reality is you're going to have instances where you're going to have a fire.
Yeah.
Right. So having things such as a suppression agent specifically designed for lithium battery fire, and having things, there can be some debate, but having lithium fire blankets available, they need to be, but all these type of things require proper training of your crew.
Yeah.
You don't want to put a lithium fire blanket on something and then remove it too soon, because then you're gonna encounter issues where you're talking about the off-gassing that occur and potential reflaming, which can be a bigger issue. So, you got to get the right equipment, but you also got to do the right training with your crew to make sure they properly know how to address it. And this is where, I'll hand off to Mike here, because part of it is your greater success on putting these fires out is, and stopping it, is to get to it as quickly as possible. All right. And the best way to do that is from a detection standpoint.
Yeah, so I was going to say, we'll jump over to Mike, then we have a couple of questions over here, and then come back around to the side of the room. So just talk briefly, about the detection, because I think that was a big piece that came out of our discussion in Monaco, is a lot of people didn't realize or understand the detection technology for this type of an issue that's available. And that's a pretty big jump, I think, in the industry to help us really address that. So
I've heard a few times today, people talk about passive detection. Smoke detectors and things like that. But available for the past 15, 20 years has been active detection. Active detection for smoke and gases comes in a couple different varieties. One of them is called an aspirated smoke and gas detection system, and there's several manufacturers. I'm partial to one of them. But what it does is, instead of having smoke detectors on a ceiling or in different areas where you have to wait for the smoke to get to the sensor, or you have to wait for gases to be emitted and make their way over to a sensor. These systems draw the air in, and it goes to a laser chamber where particulates are analyzed. That system, that's been around for many years. It was approved at one point in time to be on marine vessels. There's certain reasons why I think the company decided not to go forward getting it approved again, but we've been in some serious talks with them to get that approval. The aspirated smoke detection systems will detect smoke and gases well before any other passive smoke or gas detection sensor can be, whether it be LEL type sensors or parts per million type sensors. So you can get those aspirated systems in small areas, such as workbench situations where maybe you have a charging station. By best practices, instead of having charging adapters all over the place, you can have one particular workbench set up in proper suppression in the area, and also with proper ventilation, which is another big key. So the system that we specifically use for lithium-ion batteries is called Lion Tamer. So Lion Tamer was developed by a company called Nexeris for the U.S. Navy back in the early 2000s for the lithium-ion battery on those vessels. That was first generation. Generation 2 came out and was used for data centers and battery energy storage facilities and things like that. Generation 3 will be available, supposed to be this April, but now it's going to be May 1st. We have put the product through testing, and it is about to be approved by Lloyd's and DNV. We hope that all goes well. So what this does, and first I'd like to explain how a battery fails. So you take a lithium-ion battery, and there's multiple types. There's little tiny cells, large cells. There's batteries that look like bags. On the blank on what the name of them actually are. But the batteries, whether they're damaged through electrical issues or overcharging or undercharging issues or some type of physical damage, whether it be vibration, shock, somebody drops something on the deck, or maybe something gets loose, and as you're going over the waves, something gets dinged, and when you bring it back on board to charge, that's when you ultimately realize you've got a major issue with that battery. But the very first thing that happens when the battery goes dead is there is a vent on every single battery, whether it's a LFP or an NMC or whatever type of lithium battery you have. A gas will come out of the battery. It's actually not a gas, it's actually a vapor called electrolyte solvent vapor. It's a VOC, and that is the very first instance that a battery will start to go bad. And that's what these sensors detect. And we're giving up to anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes warning that you're going to have a problem. We haven't even gotten to the point where thermal runaway is about to begin. Thermal runaway can be anywhere down the line from there. So we're telling you, you better go check on this section of battery or this module or this charging station somewhere. What happens at that point is once you go through the release of the electrolyte solvent vapor, there's a certain amount of time, and then that's when you will get to thermal runaway. Thermal runaway can be prevented by removing the charging or removing the connection that is drawing on that battery. We'll send signals to the ship's monitoring system, to the fire alarm, and you could also have connections to suppression systems, whether that be manual or automated. So the one system I mentioned is an aspirated smoke and gas detection system, which I do want to bring up this one point. It is not only the yachts that we have to protect themselves, but also, you mentioned earlier, the repair facilities and the build sheds. You know, the workers driving around the build shed, what do? They go from building to building, and they're using scooters or hoverboards or e-bikes. And what do? They come back and they put the e-bike somewhere inside the facility. We really have to start to take a look at that so that, you know, some catastrophe doesn't happen just because someone parked a bike or something like that too close, pardon me, you know, to the building. So the systems that I mentioned, I don't know that we would actually go and use the line camera system inside a build shed or something like that. But certainly the aspirated smoke detection systems will work so much faster than a plastic smoke detector mounted 80 feet in the air, 80 feet in the air inside the build shed itself. I'm running out of thoughts, so
we're running out of time too. So, well, unfortunately, I know this is a topic that we're going to continue to discuss. We're probably going to have part 3 at some point as part of the ISS speaker and leadership series, because this is a problem that's really big for the industry that we want to continue to solve. I apologize to the people because I know we had a lot of questions. That's what the cocktail hour is for, that I'm sure most of these folks will be here for the cocktail hour to be able to talk to them, ask them one-on-one. I appreciate the panelists. Thank you, lady and gentlemen, for being here. Thank you to ISS for the seminar, and I will pass it back to Norma, and we will continue on with our next seminar.
Well, you know, it seems like I don't really need one of those. You know, it's really interesting that we have topics that need to be covered more than once, and apparently 3 times or more. I mean, I still have questions about Li-ion batteries. I know that Captain Wendy and Captain Herb and Jim Ruplo still have more questions. So I look forward to learning more about it. And Laura's point about the aging of everything on your yacht, including batteries, I imagine is relevant as well. The next subject that we're talking about is navigational safety. And apparently that one is also an extremely hot topic, because I can share with you that we had a number of people that were very, very interested in leading this discussion because they knew so much about it. So we put a bunch of straws in the hand, and Steve Monk from DeGamma was the lucky one that drew the longest or the shortest straw. I'm not sure which one it is. And we have several people in the room that are very, very knowledgeable on the subject. Eric, are you not coming up here? Well, I'm sure you're going to ask questions. There you go. This is Steve Monk, and Steve, I'd like to thank you very much for once again participating in Okay, thank you. I give you your chairman here, Steve Monk, again.
Thanks, Norman. You're in for a depressing afternoon. We've set fire to the boats so far. Now I'm going to sink them. I'm going to go through a few bits and pieces. The point of this one, other than the fact that I was not allowed to bring my soapbox into the country, Pete Southgate had already warned me on the size of the soapbox. He was fearful that I might go off on some wild tangent with this one, because I do get passionate about navigation. But as he explained to me and called me up a couple of weeks ago and said, we just need to discuss the rules of engagement. My line back to him, especially being ex-military, was, it's my understanding from working with the US Navy that they ignore the rules of engagement, and therefore I'm going to do the same thing. Ooh, that's where you're going with this one. The look at it was, for this particular session, was to look at navigation incidents, collisions and groundings, and I will allow the panel to introduce themselves shortly to go through. My biggest fear is that we take this attitude in this particular industry, which kind of ties in with what's just been mentioned about with the fires. We heard those quotes of the numbers. That's of the numbers that have been reported. In this particular aspect of navigational incidents, collisions, groundings, there are so many more happening that we don't hear about. from my company's side of things, when we go out there and we start talking to the crew and we're doing the training, we will hear more in one morning around a coffee table of incidents than you're going to hear in months of just sitting in an office. There are people in this room who know that there are lots more incidents, collisions and groundings, but we don't talk about it. So unfortunately, I've been invited in this afternoon to talk about it, which is why I'm going to leave all of those words up on the screen so you can look through them whilst I do a quick background of who I am, and then the team will also introduce themselves. From my side of it, I joined the Royal Navy in 1988. I did 22 years working for Her Majesty. I'm a navigator by trade. I've navigated everything from mine hunters through to aircraft carriers. I spent 2 years at the US Naval Academy in Annapolis, training US midshipmen who all wanted to go off and be Tom Cruise and fly fighter jets. Those who failed the course or didn't do as well ended up going off and driving ships and submarines. I left the Navy in 2009, and through then the establishment of Degama Maritime, 2 arms to the company, one of which is looking after the navigational support of the yachts through the provision of electronic charts, paper charts, stores, etc. The other then developed into training, and it was a new build captain who's rather well known in the industry, published a book last year, is going on a world book tour, and as I understand, talking to him a couple of weeks ago, is in negotiations now to make a film. He said he needed somebody to come on board and work with his crew, which was a full range of everything from seasoned veterans, master mariners, engineers, through to total greenhorns, commercial, military, no experience, the whole works. What could we do for him? And through that, we develop training and we do onboard crew training. From our company perspective in firefighting, which is why the last session was one I sat on my hands for, because I have got some strong opinions, but also from the navigation perspective. I'm going to go to the table, and actually I'll start, Kelly, if I may, just grab one mic and work your way along the table, please.
You know, Steve, I would like to point out that we really don't have any secrets here, that captain he's referring to happens to be a member of the board of directors of the International Super Yacht Society, and his name is Brendan O'Shaughnessy.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm Kelly Gordon. I'm a motor yacht captain on a 106-foot San Lorenzo, and I have grown over the last couple of years to have a little bit of a voice in this industry. And so you might often hear me speaking out about certain things, and like Steve, navigation is one of those things that I'm very passionate about. So I'm gonna leave the rest for question to give my 2 cents.
Neil McLaren, unfortunately, you've got another Royal Naval officer here. I'm a little bit, let's just say Nelson's father preached a good sermon a few years before Steve. Marine engineer officer, now a marine surveyor, and I've been doing it in this country 30 years, so thank you for letting me stay. I tend to end up with the results of groundings, collisions, and everything else. But I see what goes on. So the next.
It's Mike Voigt. So I'm last 7 years deck instructor at Blue Water Crew Training, our Fort Lauderdale campus, teaching all the MCA large commercial yacht courses up to 3,000 ton master, and U.S. Coast Guard courses up to 200 U.S. Coast Guard gross registered tons. Background, I was a Navy officer, Canadian Coast Guard officer. So master unlimited tonnage near coastal, chief officer unlimited tonnage oceans, got to sail on all Canada's 3 oceans, the Atlantic, Pacific, and of course the Arctic. And never thought I'd be a teacher, but 7 years, and we can probably talk about that. I am still shocked, but we pushed into 1 week of training in a course called GSK, General Ship Knowledge. Politely put, as my wife says, probably the worst named course ever for many of you masters in the room who did take courses like that. So anyways, I'm here.
My name's Erin Acker. I started out on working on sailboat, like many of you in this room. I worked my way through that to going to the Maritime Academy, to working in commercial shipping for a couple of years. Many of you don't know that about me. I worked for container service and bulk cargo services. And then I went to law school, and I've been a lawyer and partner at Moore Company. I've been working there for 19 years. We're a maritime and aviation law firm based out of Miami, Florida, and I'm also the president of the ISS.
I'm Eric Spire, the Director of Sales with Blue Water Books and Charts. Not to be confused with, I think we have the name first. But, we're navigational specialists, and what we really do is spend a lot of time providing data to yachts, whether that be in charts, digital, or paper, but all the things that go around navigation, including all of the compliance documents that they need to have in terms of all the stuff that Peter's flag requires to have from a navigational standpoint. But really the focus here is, data, cartography. That's really what we specialize in.
Okay, thank you. What I want to do is also gauge who's in the audience. So can I just have a show of hands if you are captain or crew? Excellent. Management? Legal? Never mind. And flag states? Okay, so we've got a mix, which is good. What we wanted to look at, and hopefully you've had a chance to go through some of those words, I'd like to put my hand on my heart and probably say there's nobody in this room who would disagree with everything, or even one of those that's up there on that screen, as being something where we have a problem. With the team that we've got, the reason why we've got these people in for this particular one, it gives you the command experience, the investigating, the training, the legal, and obviously the supply. So we're covering that wide network. And we as a team have all been talking in advance. We know that there are problems out there. And I think, if I can just throw this back at the table for now, what are your hot topics? What is it that you would say within your realm, your area? Why are we having these navigational incidents, be they the collisions or the groundings? What are you seeing in your field as the top point?
Yeah, I think for us, it really boils down to a couple of things. Failure to set up ECDIS correctly. We're seeing a lot of new builds come out with brand new ECDISes. The crews may not be trained on them. In a lot of instances, this may be the first time a captain's ever seen an ECDIS like that. The charts that are required to go in a boat to run paperless are regulatory, and in a lot of cases, they're nowhere close to the best data for a given area. I use the Bahamas as an example because it's in our backyard. The official charts for the Bahamas aren't that great compared to some of the private data. So the yachts are, mandated to carry a certain set of charts. And then we kind of tell them, hey, we should really, have some supplemental charts. And trying to find that balance between, what they need for regulatory requirements and what they need to really navigate properly, I think is hard. There's a lot of different type specs out there. And I really see a lot of the issue with then crew changeover. So I know that was something we spoke about this morning, but you may have a crew that understands their ECDIS, but then they may move to another boat. It's a completely different ECDIS. They have the same charts, the operation is different. And oftentimes, especially on very busy charter boats, there's not that much time to do the training. And I think that education is really important, and it's probably what we spend as much time as we can doing. But our company is not an ECDIS trainer. I know that there are people here to do that. The local training companies do a really good job of that. But it's hard to sort of train to every single bridge. They're all different, and they all have their idiosyncratic ways of loading the charts, and then again, understanding which chart is the best for what area. So we kind of always recommend take as much data as you can with you, take the most conservative estimate. I think that's probably the best place to start. There's a lot of other things up there, ego attitude. Oh, I've been here a million times, I don't need to look at the chart. Well, shoaling does happen. I hear this all the time. Well, islands don't do it. Well, sure, but after Dorian, there were numerous places on the charts that were just totally incorrect. Certainly areas of the world that are more well charted with, proper navies, such as areas in the Med and stuff, you're going to have that better data. But in areas that yachts like to go, South Pacific, the Caribbean, you really don't find that. So they're kind of left to their own devices sometimes. And there's some ways that they deal with that. But really trying to provide better data, and then, you know, hopefully getting that data approved by regulatory standards, I think would go a long way in providing mariners the best information possible.
I agree, and I think this also touches on something that Norman brought up this morning on the crowdsourced bathymetry, which is, I think, what you were hinting at with seakeepers. So yachts are the new survey boats of the future. Exactly as you've mentioned, the official charts do not meet sufficient standard in which to safely navigate in a lot of areas of the planet. And poor old Pete Southgate has had me harassing him about this since the day I came into the industry. I'll be nice to you. You're right in that we need to encourage vessels to understand, carry the official charts, but there's no harm in carrying the unofficial to back up. It's all part of your risk assessment. You have to go down these paths. If you've got an owner who is enforcing that they really wish to go into a particular location, and I'm sure, Kelly, you've probably been in that situation, you have to be able to back it up. And classically, you bring up the Bahamas with Nassau. I'm aware of a vessel which actually we support the navigation services of, but what I was not aware of was the fact they've run aground in Nassau recently because they've changed the berth. I've got 2 clients who've been emailing me in the last 7 days, despite the fact I'm supposed to be on leave, but hey, they know where to find me. They're wanting to go there, but the charts are not up to date. And at the moment, the Hydrographic Office are desperately working with the local port authority trying to get those charts up to date because there are ships going in there. So we have to look at the bigger picture and how we're going to do it. But from the education and the setup with the ECDIS, which might be one I'm going to bring over to the next blue water in a second, it is a case of crew do not get the proper understanding. They don't get the time to understand. They don't understand with the regulations that the training for the use of the electronic chart system on the bridge is actually delegated to the captain. It's not an IMO requirement. There is no formal familiarization course and hasn't been since 2017. So that's actually in the captain's responsibility to train their bridge team. But what a lot of people do is say, oh, go online to SafeBridge. You don't get everything you need working through an online situation. No offense, Abby. But actually, you do need to work with a person or company, and I'm not saying that's us because we don't do onboard ECDIS training, but you do need to understand how to set the equipment up properly to use it. Mike, anything to add into that?
I guess I got the mic. If you're asking, and the question was, you said, what is our personal thought that we get most accidents and collisions? Of all your things up there, I'm going to go right to the last one. Failure or embarrassment to ask for help. And it goes right back to leadership. And us that are sailors in the room, we all have our favorite captain we sail for. He or she was the person that showed us. They taught us. We didn't feel embarrassed to go, hey, Cap, I really don't know. Or they came on the bridge. How's it going? Every night before they went to bed, they actually wrote their night orders out and went through and said, be cool with this, you know. And, we train them to give a 1 week to 2 week course. Okay, we try to give them everything we got. But when they leave there, you just can see which ones came in. They were keen to learn. They felt they weren't embarrassed to ask questions in class. They helped their classmates. And other ones came in, or still come in, with an attitude like, I better not say anything because I'm going to be embarrassed. So I think the biggest one is leadership, which leads to a failure by our crews to build a learning environment aboard their ships. They need to know protected. And it doesn't just happen. I'll go even happen on Canadian Coast Guard. I had ships that I felt, hey, I learned a lot. The captain let me work the sticks. He let me do more. Okay, some ships don't touch that. So I don't think that's nothing new, but it's been around, and we have to keep working on that in the industry, I think.
You do. And interestingly, at the Nice crew conference that I was at 2 weeks ago, leadership and mentoring was put down as one of the biggest issues for crew concern. They don't feel that they're getting the leadership, but at the same time, what leadership training do captains get? Crew and personnel join the industry if they're going through all their mandatory courses. What a lot of people don't understand, which is why it's up there to do with egos and attitude, is there are some people who believe when they finish a course, they're an expert in that subject. They believe that when they join a vessel, be it as an officer of the watch, an engineer, chief officer, a captain, that they know it all and you can't tell them anything. They're not prepared to understand that you are at the minimum level for that particular position. Now comes forth the education and the learning. And if you've got good mentoring through good captains who work with the crew, and it was touched on again this morning, which I know is something that's going to be big for the next session, so I don't want to steal the thunder there.
it develops a better rapport with a better crew, which can enhance the safety. And that then leads to the better experience. Kelly.
So I want to go back to that. Why do we think more collisions and more drowning are happening?
I think there's a lot of paper captains out there right now. So, for example, you get the chef who's got all the sea time, and then he decides he just wants to up and change careers, and so he goes and he passes the test and he gets his captain license, and somehow he gets a command. Well, just because you have your license doesn't mean that you're really a captain and that you have the knowledge and ability to do that. So I think that is one thing, and you see people signing off for sea time, and maybe in the world of the MCA they do a better job of verifying that. But I know in the Coast Guard side of the world, you can ask your buddy for some extra sea time. They sign off on it. You get the sea time, below 200 tons. That's not verified. So you can get a license and be out running boats. And so there's that element of it, and then there's mentorship. I mean, we've talked about it already, but it seems like for whatever reason there's a bit of in this industry, captains, not all, but there's some that they don't want to share the knowledge. They don't want to give up the knowledge. They want to hold on to that. If they've got that knowledge, they've got the power, and they don't. I've had several crew members come to me and say, I've been on this boat for 2 years and I can't get any helm time. Well, then leave, because if you want to be a captain, you need helm time. And so there's not enough mentorship, and also do your due diligence. You're talking about the charts for the Bahamas, and Bahamas is where they're probably 9 months out of the year, and all over the place. And there are areas that I go into every single time on charter, and every single time I send my mate ahead of me on the tender. And I say, go look at see what the current's doing, go make sure nothing's shifted if the storms come through. And it may be overkill that I send him through certain areas every single time, but that's why I get through that area that's a little sketchy every single time. So then that gets back into ego, so are you not wanting to ask for help, or are you at that age where you're just good enough and you got just enough experience that you think you don't need to ask for help anymore? Or, I spend hours, I've spent years of my career in the Bahamas, but I still spend hours reviewing my charts before I go somewhere just to refresh my memory. But I think it goes back though to training, education, like, the guys are saying, we sit in a course for a week and you turn us loose and we're supposed to be able to go drive a boat. Like, that just seems a little not right. And so I think it goes back to education, and then encouraging more people to be good mentors. But then you get back to leaders, we're not all born leaders, but I do things all of the time. I'm always reading a new book on leadership. I'm watching a YouTube video on leadership. I'm looking at ways, different learning styles, and how can I instruct my crew differently. The way I'm going to talk to one of my students is different than the way I'm talking to my engineer, different than the way I'm talking to my chief mate. But I spend a lot of time reading on leadership and teaching and that kind of thing. And I think there needs to be more of an emphasis on HODs and captains to take that on. You take this position on, you're not just the boss, but you're a leader, you're a coach, you're a mentor.
Which is difficult though, because if you are in a position of HOD or even command, there is so much weight on your shoulders of so many different aspects to deal with. You're not just running a boat. That boat is a company. You've got personnel, you've got HR, you've got accountancy aspects. You've got every single thing that maybe the boss then built their company up doing, but they've got hundreds of people doing it, whereas on the vessel, you've got a handful. And to try and put all of that onto those shoulders, it needs to be understood in the wider perspective, which is why I was trying to hint at this morning on the education and understanding for owners to know what it is they're getting into. That actually crew do need to learn to train. Take it to the new build stage. We work with so many new builds in the firefighting aspects, and so often
crew are desperate to get us on board. The benefit of doing training on board is that you've got that crew in their environment with their equipment, looking at their procedures. And it's a lot cheaper because, of course, you're only flying out 1 or 2 instructors as opposed to 20 crew into a different location. But what you're trying to do is say to an owner, the boat's going to run late in the build program, but we need a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to go through every different category on board the boat, not just fire, nav, but interior staff. We need to train the engineers. We need to look at the emergency systems. We need to look at the launching systems for all the life rafts. Give us a chance, what from a military perspective was known as a workup, to be able to understand how to use this boat to be able to provide you with the best possible experience. But if that's not explained to an owner that training is essential and it needs to be continual and we need to find time to squeeze it into the year, then what chance have we got if owners don't have that explained out to them?
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about in the session before we broke for lunch, is how do we get to the owners? How do we get them to understand that we need to train, you know? And so when you have us doing 20 weeks of charter a year, where's the time to do that? We barely have the time to breathe. So, you know, and like I said to those of you that weren't here before lunch, I'm bold. I'll say no, but not everybody will. So how does it maybe start with the builder then? Does the builder need to take on more responsibility of educating the owner?
It's going to go through everywhere. And interesting you mentioned the builder, because we've had a significant builder approach the super yacht training group saying that what they want to do is bring us in to explain to an owner that 2 years before the boat hits the water, you are going to be bringing in trainers to work with the crew so that they can start to get the education as they go all the way through, and then ultimately put in this workup period. If it's done early enough and an owner understands that the crew are not there to just serve, the crew are there to pull them out of the water when there's been a man overboard, to put out the fire, to help them into the life raft, to be there doing all those jobs that nobody really wants to talk about, but actually they can only do it properly if they've been trained properly for it. Sorry, can you throw the mic behind? I've got a question behind, and then I think you were.
Hopefully I can speak loud enough. I come from the insurance side. This is a problem we face every single day, and more. There's more of a problem in the last couple of years. We have an absence of people coming back into the country because of COVID. But part of the problem, I think you just nailed it. You said you've got to say no. You just nailed it. You said we've got to have the owners aware of problems. Because right now I'm in an environment where I think owners are looking for available first and cheap second. And maybe cheap first and available second. I've got people that aren't even licensed. They don't even have they're not even allowed to drink yet. And they're being proposed as first mate engineer on a 130-foot boat. The bird's not running. There's a captain who's probably 27 years old that I was begged into doing. And I'm sorry for anybody here in the management room. It doesn't help when you're pushing back on the insurance, saying, well, if they don't accept this guy, we're going to lose the insurance, to find somebody who's going to say yes. That doesn't help matters. That's just kicking the can down the road. And I really want to work more with the managers in this room and the captains in this room on this development stuff. One of my questions is, you know, again, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the MCA regulations in terms of the charter boats. Are there minimum requirements for certain positions on yachts when it comes to the MCA is the one I'm thinking of more primarily. But is there any type of regulations out there that says, you know, to be in this position on a boat being chartered, you need this many hours, you need to have this type of license, and this sort of thing. Otherwise, I won't shut up.
I wanted to address a couple of things in the last few points. Firstly, when you were talking about educating the owner during the build and such things, my question would be, well, where's the yacht manager and all this? When we're involved in the build, we're not only making sure that the build is built to the specification and the buyer are getting what it is they asked for, and the class and flag are coming along with us on the ride and they're convinced and comfortable that everything has been built properly. We're also making sure that we're also recruiting qualified, competent, experienced seafarers to run the boat, giving them the training they need for the specific type of eclipse or whatever other equipment is on board, sourcing that training. You know, I'm not saying that we have all the answers. What we have is a phone book friends like Steve and others who had to source that training, and simplistic training as well, familiarization training, make sure everyone on board goes through every fire escape. Everyone, whoever's in the engine, the deck boy can find his way out of the engine room in one of the fire escapes. Oh, then you're down there. Well, you're part of the fire party. You will be down there, and it will be smoky and hot, and you will be scared. So now's the time for you to find out which way that door handle works. So all these things should be happening because the owner has taken on a competent management company. And if there is a management company that's saying, if you don't accept this guy, we're going to change insurance, I would say, we'll change insurance because we don't want to play with you. Because I would be very concerned that you're going to take on a liability and be faced with a loss should you dance with the devil. The answer it was in a movie years ago, the answer to every question is someone in the Godfather. I think that comes down to if you go down with dogs, you get up with fleas.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
So with respect to I agree with what Richie's saying, because for clients who have management companies involved, the initial build process and gathering of crew seems to, that's not really where the problem lies. But I think somebody said we need to have people coming into the shipyard to be trained during the construction. You mentioned that 2 years in. I mean, from a legal perspective, we see the legal contracts, construction contracts, basically, builders not wanting anybody in the facility. I mean, it's hard enough to get a project manager approved. So, I mean, that aspect of it really needs to change. And then going beyond that, it's what we see is once the boat is delivered, it's the problems with the crew come later, like when somebody quits, somebody's gone, and then, because there's just such a lack of qualified crew, sometimes the guy who's really not qualified just moves up. And, the first mate that shouldn't be driving the boat suddenly is driving the boat, and that's where some of these problems come in. Like, you go to the Bahamas, they don't really know, they haven't, the boat runs aground. Really a lot of that going on right now in my world, because we have such a crew situation.
Yeah, and I think, I've got all hands. Just quickly to throw one back on the training side, and I agree with everything said. What we see from the live training that we're doing is when we go to an operational vessel and we get them to run a fire drill so we can just see what standard they're at, not one, and I mean not one vessel of all those we've trained in the last 12 years has ever got the face seal procedures correct for the breathing apparatus they're wearing. So if that's the case, what chance do we have when the shit hits the fan?
Steve, I'd like to ask the same question that I asked at the last panel, and that is, do you guys think, are we seeing more groundings, more collisions? Or is that another myth? And why do you think that is? We're talking about navigation safety here. Why do you think that is?
It's a lack of experience. Really, got plenty of folks out there. I came out here 20-something years ago and have been in the Med, been in the Caribbean for the most part, and part of the network of over 2,000 captains around that Colin Squire set up many years ago. And I just checked 250-something captains on just our Bahamas WhatsApp. And a number of us this morning are trying to explain to a guy who's trying to take 4.3 meters through Cistern Cut and thinks somehow he's going to do some math and get out on the western side. Why? Because he doesn't have the adequate charts to do his job, because he didn't get coached. I'm going to take it up just one notch above the ego thing. It's a bunch of us and a bunch of different committees and groups and all concerned about this is if something doesn't happen to address the bad decision-making process of putting inexperienced people in a compromised position, people are going to get tired of insuring this. When the insurance people go away, too late. Yeah. Well, no, we're too late. And I'll tell you why we're too late, because how many people are insuring named storm anymore? What happened to the whole market? How many people got out? 31 are gone. Now, who's going to come next with yachts? They don't need it. They'll insure something else. It's all gambling and they don't care. And sometimes there's influence they can. But it's back to teaching good decision-making and uncompromised decision-making. That's where it all goes wrong is.
Yeah, and I just add to it, because we talked about this earlier in the day, a good owner, a
great owner makes great decisions with his crew so that this training can happen, so that these things can happen. And we have so many first timers in buying boats. And we want to make sure that they stay in yachting, love yachting, grow in yachting. And so I mean, I greatly appreciate what management has to do in order to educate these newbies. But it's a concern because we don't want to lose them. We want them to stay in boating. But insurers are very hesitant, I will say that, to insure a first-time owner on a 120 plus foot boat because they know that the decision making needs to come from somebody who's a grown-up.
Even if they have professional crew aboard one?
Well, okay, so it depends on the captain, because here's the problem is we're losing the captain as quickly as we, and Rick can talk to this too. We make the decision based on the captain and then the captain's gone.
Yeah, new owners are going through captains. I think you actually mentioned it. Are they looking for people to serve them? Or are they looking for people to operate their $7 million property? That's what I have to note on.
I'd like to add, that's a complaint I hear all the time from crew, and it's up there is poor bridge design and layout. And often, and this is a new build, the crew that's actually running the boat are not the ones that have any say on how the bridge is built. That's either done by a build captain. And now in some cases, you know, it's been an owner that's done with the captain for a very long time, and this goes to the crew age versus experience. Well, you know, he may have a ton of experience on a 50 meter, and is getting up there in age and used to what's going on, and suddenly, you know, the owner's building an 80 meter and he's now running it and has no experience there. And hopefully he's got, or she, hopefully they have, you know, a really dedicated first or second officer. But you know, the other thing Kelly brought up too, that I just wanted to add to is it's time also on the boat, like during charter. I hear this all the time, especially from sort of the 50 meter range. They're like, oh, we're running around with 50 all the time. And then I got to sit down and it's 9 p.m. and write my pass point the next day. Because the guests come first, right? And so a lot of that is kind of afterthought. You know, I've seen a bridge, I won't name it, but it's got cup holders all over, right next to the exits. When are you going to put your Bud Light there? Well, you know, someone didn't design that in a way that meant that boat was going to be ran professionally. And I think getting that input from the people that are actually going to be operating the vessel long term and have some of this understanding is very important and often overlooked thing. And that's not my opinion. That's what I hear from the group.
So I'm finding it really interesting because the last seminar we talked all about aging boats and people aging out and boats aging out, and now we're talking all about new builds. And there's a lot of disconnect in there. So a lot of captains that are being approved that are favorites of the management companies and of the insurance companies are what I call yes captains. They will yes the guests and give them whatever they want, no matter what. And some of those captains are in this room, but I'm obviously not going to name anyone, but I've seen it time and time again, and they do that. They just, whatever the guests want, whatever the guests are happy, that's when they're happy, and they are always working, always working. The no captains have a harder time because we are difficult because, oh, well, you know what? It's 12 to 14 out there, not really a good day for fishing. What do you mean we can't go out? That type of thing. So when we say no, we kind of get our hands slapped and we get a little bit, that's not so good. Going to the point of, I've been doing a lot of teaching and educating of crew, and I've always felt that as a captain, it's my responsibility to train the next generation to be the captains and crew. Everyone on my boat could dock the boat. I don't care if you're a stewardess or a laundry girl. Your hands are going to be on that throttle and on that wheel at some point in time, because I don't want you to underestimate what I'm doing or what anybody else is doing, but I also want you to understand what it takes. And you never know who we're going to spark some of your young girls' brain and say, wait, you can do this, I can do this. And so it's a little bit of just that continuity of pushing and pulling to bring our crew forward and helping them understand the importance of everything on the bridge. I've worked with some stews that have been in the industry for 13 years that don't know how to fill out a logbook. They don't know. One girl didn't, she worked on yachts for 8 years, didn't know what a compass rose was. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. And I'm like, okay, let me tell you, let me explain it to you. But there are not a lot of captains out there that would do that. I think it's the smaller captains, the smaller boat captains, it's really important that we get to, because they're the ones that are going to be moving up into the bigger boats. The training on the new builds, yes, it helps, but we've all seen absolute can of worms once we start getting into a yard period, because this captain focused on this one focused on that. So we end up with this disaster and fire issues and electrical issues and all those other issues. So it's really like, I make a point of when a new crew member comes on the boat, they spend at least a day, if not a week, just going through every single cabinet, everything on the boat, and then asking questions. And I don't know, time doesn't always allow that, but I try to do the best I can for that. So it's all about training our own crew.
Well, you know, one problem is the captains like you, Wendy, and Kelly, and Herb, and some of the other people in this room. One of the reasons why you're the types of captains that are doing onboard training and really thinking deeply about navigational safety, because let's face it, we don't know when somebody's not fall down the stairs, forbid, and hurt themselves, and is not capable of driving the boat. But we're preaching to the choir.
My question is, you said that, you know, there's a lack of training right now, and from years past, is it just because, and you can't get these qualifications, good captains and crew, is it because we just have too many vessels now, new boats being built, or because they're so much larger now? What is the, because, you know, yachting's been around forever, so I'm now seeing a problem. Is it, what's contributing to this lack of education?
I don't want to turn the question around, but I think, I mean, the availability of formal training in a classroom is what I do. It is there. There's opportunity. And I will say, on the good side, when I came into this 7 years ago, you know, I quickly understood that the biggest sort of flag administration, at least for training, is the MCA. And they have in the yachting industry and the large commercial yacht certificates. Like, it isn't all doom and gloom, because the MCA has tried to mirror much that they use in the merchant navy. If you're working your way up to captain, and I know I'm really not asking your question, but I'm going to say that you have to take things like oral examinations, which are a huge, huge benefit, and they really do sort of weed out the person that cannot sort of pull it all together. Because, you know, some students are good at passing a 1 or 2 or even a 3-week training course, nav and radar, but when they get put on the hot seat and run through scenarios with an MCA examiner, they really can't pull it all together yet. Doesn't mean it's the end of their career. It just means, hey, do a little more time at sea. You know, TikTok, yes, the clock is ticking. They got 3 years on their courses, but the idea is you go back, learn a little more, and that's where you need the good captains to show them this, like, you can do it. Okay, so the formal training's there. It's pretty good. A few other new things they're talking about is better training record books. There's a project underway by the MCA to do that. What else? There's talk of cadet programs, a huge benefit. There's even talk about, and this may sound shocking, 7 years ago I wouldn't have said this, but doing for bridge simulator time in lieu of sea time, because you can do a lot in a simulator that might take you 6 months. You might never get those opportunities to try those hairy kind of navigation scenarios on the bridge of a ship. So formal training's there, but it's on board. I think that is, I think we're lucky that.
In the past, you know, you might have gotten owners that maybe started off sailing as a young kid, and then they got into it, and so then when they got their wealth, they've been seasoned boaters. Or is it just that we're seeing a brand new wealth of people coming in that never have been boating? And that's where the problems are occurring, because they don't understand boats, period.
I think we gotta go back. I see something in the class. That's it, really.
You guys want to argue, or I'll give you an
Well,
answer?
Well, when you're asking about the formal education is there, the classes are there. Yes, we get a lot jammed down our throat in terms of how much time in the week, the week that we get in the class, or the 10 days that we get in the class. But a lot of the simulators are awesome, but a lot of being a captain is OJT, on the job training. And maybe you mentioned long ago that maybe there were more mentors, there were more people.
Owners that came from a background of coding, so maybe they start scaling in and graduating on the side, where we now got new owners coming in that are on the tech, or they fit or whatever it may be, but they skills are well. And then it's never been coding. Now they're these are me, and that's what I think they're trying to do. They're not caring about the
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of owners out there, they want more for less, right? And yeah, they want more for less. And so that goes back to, again, how do we get to them? How do we educate them what we need? But then we also need to create a culture of mentoring. I mean, I talk to my mate all the time about learning styles, about when he's working with people on the deck below him, so
that really leads us into the next discussion. Steve wants to finish up.
Yes, everyone,
So, simple fact of the matter is, it's motivating what motivates the person. So many ages ago, most of us in this room have been in the industry, we chose to go to sea. We wanted to go to sea as our passion. Therefore, it took up our spare time. Our subconscious is surrounded by it. Nowadays, we're being flooded with people. It's a job. It's a paycheck. It's an opportunity. Different motivating factors, that's what drives whether they're going to train or they're going to study extra or pay extra attention. It all goes back to how much attention and devotion they're going to give to it. Just like any other career field it's going to be. That's what's changing what we have seen and what we are seeing now. Vetting is going to be one of the solutions, and we've already seen in the insurance industry, because I've had plenty of complaints when the boat is required to 200 ton, but the insurance company says nobody without a 500 ton is going to do it. Management companies have stepped up the plate. You know what? We're not even going to interview you without a higher level license to run the boat. So more vetting to put that in place. Yes, if it takes a 3,000 ton license to go run a 100-foot jet leopard, then that's what it's going to take. But the vetting is hard to do because you don't want to lose the clients. Back to compromised decision making, being above greed. I mean, being above ego, let's top it off with just greed. Number one, a very smart man years ago told me, Herb, it's all about the money. Okay, and he's wearing great socks today. I just wanted to point that out. Amazing socks today, no doubt about it. But the decision-making process nowadays, a lot of us went to sea because of the passion. You said so yourself. There's a vetting process. Some people got to fly airplanes and the rest of them got to drive submarines and boats. Not everybody gets to be an astronaut. And that's the hard line. You may go and get the education, you can go take the classes, but decision-making, whether or not I'm going to drive over that shallow area really hard, or I'm going to navigate that tough area at night, or I'm going to go in there because I have my vision because of the design of the cockpit, the backlighting, and who put white on the dash, all bad decisions at the yard, they'll have to come into play. Now, in aviation, which some of you are all aware about, has that vetting process. I can't keep my pilot license current without going out with a senior examiner within a certain period of time and making sure that they check my decision-making process. Can we do that? We can sure do that. And you've got the mechanisms in place. The insurance companies have the ability to say, this is what we want to do. Getting together with regulatory people say, we want more of an aviation style. Within a certain period of time, you need to go out and prove these functions, whether on a simulator or actual demonstration on type of craft. And don't even get me going on boats that are going over the high-speed craft code limits that have complete knuckleheads driving.
There's a lot we could cover. Unfortunately, time always catches up with us. One key point before I finish that I wanted to stress is I'm not saying that everybody out there is bad, and I'm not saying that unless you're ex-military, you haven't got a clue. So please don't misunderstand from that side. There are very good crews and captains that we work with, and we have some phenomenal boats that we go out and work with and train. There are boats that call us back on an annual basis to do more training with them because they get it. They know that we can take stuff to them, but we can also learn from them. There is a lot that needs to change in this industry. And I think the easiest way is if you could change everything and reverse all of those on the board, we'd be laughing. So I just want to finish by thanking every member of the panel, and I'm going to hand you back over to Norma, who's going to throw us out to the next.
You know, I think it's really interesting that we started talking about navigation, fires, very specific things that are involved in the operation of vessels. But this morning, I've spent a lot of time talking about the subject dearest and dearest to my heart, and that is professional crew and what it is that makes crews successful on their yachts, how they can best take care of their owners. I would like to say, before we get into our panel assembled here for the next subject, which is crew welfare, a lot of us have mentioned over many, many different educational forums the fact that there are owners that have a need of being educated because maybe they didn't grow up in yachting, as Kelly would say. But the reality is, you know, we've all jokingly talked about OTS, owner training school. I don't know whether we're actually ever going to see a school that's in that, but I'm saying to all of you that all of us are involved in that circle of helping owners be more knowledgeable about what is involved in running a vessel, owning a vessel. So part of what we're talking about, if we're going to ensure our next topic, which is crew welfare, that is so incredibly important to the industry, that all of us participate in that circle of helping yacht owners know what it is, because a knowledgeable owner is always a happier owner. And I would be happy to discuss that topic with anybody that disagrees. Now, we have fabulously shod Graham Lord. Come on, Graham, show us those socks. And in case you didn't see it, his socks have sushi.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Graham Lord. Thank you, Norma, for the introduction. For those who don't know me, I spent 10 years at sea as a chief engineer. Definitely wasn't a professional crew member. I just had a blast. And 23 years ago, I moved ashore into the yacht management sector. 12 years ago, I started Fairport Yacht Support as an independent yacht management company, which is no longer an independent yacht management company because we now want to remax. But the subject, that's my background in crew. I think the subject I've heard all day is the yachts have gotten a lot more complicated. You know, with complication, you're looking for a more sophisticated crew member to run it. When you listen today, you know, we were expected to look after the boat and be able to pour a drink and look after the crew, and look after the guests. But asking guests to know how to pour an awesome cocktail, but also didn't know how to put up a lithium fire, that's a lot. You know, so the demands that have been put on the crew have grown significantly. Along with the desire of crew to really get involved in this industry, it seems to be diminishing, to be honest with you. I think that is a function of we saw a change from COVID, where crew were really put, you know, stay on the boat, not allowed to move, not allowed to do anything, and they were prisoners. The crew had it really tough in COVID, for what it's worth. I mean, the owner's attitude was, I stay on the boat, so if I want to use it, we don't have to worry about COVID, and to heck with your personal family needs. So I think there is a hangover from that, but I don't think that's going to be. I think that attitude is not shifted. So enough from me. I'm going to move on to the panel. The discussion today is about crew welfare, with the goal to try and find a way to improve crew retention. Listen to the previous panel, and yeah, it's great. Bring the crew 2 years before delivery of the build. Most of them want to make it through that 2 year. New builds are tough. They're time consuming and they're tough, and crew burn out. So you put all that energy to train your crew, and 6 weeks after delivery, 80% of them quit. That's the reality. How do we change that? So I'm going to hand over to our panel. I guess I'll just start at the left and move across. My first subject, what are we doing wrong? One thing I would really take away today is we can talk about this all afternoon, but to try to move away something we can actually do. I think we know what the problem is, so I'm going to hand over the panel go one at a time, with maybe a couple of minutes on what really what can we do to do.
I think what we can do to improve crew welfare is look, there's good owners and there's bad owners, and it seems like what is the bad ones and what can the bad ones do to be better, but the crew have a lot more demands on them. As you're saying, that the boats are more complicated, there's more demands on the crew. We want time off seems to be a big one. You know, I know I have a certain amount of time scheduled into my contract, but I don't always get it. And I think sometimes crew are treated a little bit like robots. It's funny sometimes to watch these owners who own big 9-to-5 companies, and those employees get certain perks or benefits from a 9-to-5, and they would never expect their 9-to-5 to work 16 hours a day that we do. And granted, I get it, that's what we signed up for. I love my job. I love doing what I do, but I think there needs to be a better work-life balance. And it could even be, you know, one of my students said to me the other day, you know, is there somewhere we can put a treadmill in the control room or the engine room or something like that? Because I'm used to being able to vent and run and get away when I need to. And she says, when we're on charter, we're on the boat. You know, we don't get off of the boat. So I think we're looking for a better work-life balance. Is really what we're looking for.
Would you put that into the category of crew benefits or crew? I guess that does go into crew wellness, but a quality of life that you can guarantee your crew a certain standard of living on board the boat. I agree. I think all yachts should have some sort of a crew gym. Doesn't have to be a big space, but is that, you know, that's something I'm hearing. You know, what else do you think on the crew welfare is a really critical piece?
Well, it kind of hits onto my own seminar tomorrow, but I've been hearing recently is, you know, crew want to know what sort of resources they have in terms of, you know, when they're having a tough time or what kind of training. You know, I haven't yet to see a crew member that doesn't want additional training or doesn't want additional knowledge or additional coursework. So those are some of the things that I think that we can do to help. I see the number one thing that I see with crew is they want the time off, but they want to know when they're going to get the time off. You know, we can work, but as long as we know, okay, at the end of this 3-month stint, you know, we have a week off. But on some of these boats, in reality, it's hard to get there. So then that kind of brings into the idea of rotation. You know, how do we talk owners into rotation? And Norma was talking about it earlier this morning about how much it costs when we rotate through crew, you know, in terms of crew turnover and cost, and maybe is rotation something that we should put out there to owners a little bit more, show them the numbers that, you know, hey, you're losing these crew members because of burnout, and every time you lose a crew member, here's how much it costs to bring a new one in. So maybe that's something we could do.
Well, and that's the second time that's come up today. So I think that's a really interesting subject. Possibly the management companies could band together. Should we come up with what we think it is to replace a crew member, possibly by position? Because I think we're going to find that numbers a lot higher than we imagine. You know, I threw out a number early on today for those, you know, I hate to repeat myself, but we did this study back in 2002 with the Vulcan group, which was Paul Allen's group back then. To replace a junior stewardess was $27,000. You know, between flights, time to recruit, training, blah blah blah. So the numbers are a lot harder. That's 2002. Obviously, that number's gone up.
You know, and then they come in and they want to, you know, or even if you do, they want to make the boat theirs, and there's all these little things that add up to the number. I'll give this thing away here in just a second because I could spend the rest of the time with it. But you hit on something earlier, was if we can all get on a unified front. So managers are so important to us. You're the link between us and the owner. And some management companies are afraid to say no because they don't want to lose the client. But if all management got on the unified front and said, no, this is what you need to do, this is what the crew need, and then so the owners know that they're not just going to be able to go to someone else, and pay maybe a slightly higher fee to get someone to tell them yes.
So that you touched on being a yacht manager myself, and a really helpful subject for us is that we are unified on some things, but we're also the same as just about everybody in this industry. We're horribly insecure. And the clients, the yacht custodians, because I don't like calling them owners anymore, are very good at making people feel insecure.
Very good.
And if maybe a bit of banding together, so I'll put this back to the insurance underwriters. You could help us here by vetting the management companies and say, here's the list of 25, 50, whatever the number of management companies we vetted, and we know that they are unified and they're going to do job X, and the rest of them, because quite frankly, to be a yacht manager, you talk about the captains, the paper captains. Being a paper yacht manager is even easier. You just print a business card when you're a manager. Well, that's what I think, so moving on, Abby, on the training, because I think the training is super important.
Hi. Right. So just if I could introduce myself first. Hi everyone, my name's Abby McGrath. I'm here today representing a company called Feedly, which is a digital training platform for the whole of the maritime industry, a cloud-based solution it's a new system. Over the last 24 months, we've amassed over 70,000 seafarers globally, and we've adapted the system. Pretty much the technology is the same, just the content really is what changes for the super yacht sector. But previously, some of you may know me as the founder of A-Crew. I set up A-Crew as a community of captains and crew a long time ago now, maybe 12, 14 years ago. I've never worked on board, but I've worked carefully for a long time with seafarers, and I hope I've listened. If I can go back to your first question, Graham, which is where you said, what's wrong? What's the problem? I think, Captain Wendy, you mentioned the word disconnect, and I think that there is an unfortunate disconnect in the industry, and it feels a little bit fractured in multiple places. And I'm sure this is a problem that inherently there is in every industry. No sector is perfect. But when we come to the crew, I think first of all, we should understand who we're talking about. Somebody in the audience today who I respect very, very highly said to me, oh, these millennials. But the truth is, they're not millennials. Millennials are 42 years old. Millennials have retired. Millennials are your captains, if they're still in the industry, or your chief stews. But yeah, really, your 26-year-old first mate or chief stew, a Generation Z, and we need to know what that means. So anyone born after, I think it's 1997, is classed as Generation Z, and when you look up the characteristics of that generation, one of the top things is activism. These are people who believe very much in Black Lives Matter, in equality, in all of these things, and it's not because it's the correct thing to do, it's because it actually matters to them. So this morning in the Mario forum that we had this morning, I heard one captain refer to owners as he. Repeatedly, I heard the same with captains as he. Sorry. No, but we all do it. I mean, I've done it myself. It's really not about finger pointing. It's about, we have to, I think, understand that there is a disconnect between us and the crew we're talking about. So I think something that we need to do and address and change is actually bring these people into the conversation, because we're all sitting here having a conversation about what needs to change, but who's really in the audience? We have, thankfully, captains with us, but we need more. I think we need more meaningful, genuine interaction for it to actually matter. Otherwise, we're going to be here in 10 years having the same conversation.
that's a really good point. If we're trying to make change, we're not making change amongst those of us that are on our way out. We're making change with those that are coming in. So Generation Z, you said is 97 after. How many do we have in here? No, 97. So how many do we have after 97? One. And I'm proud to say that that's my crew sitting at.
So, Abby, I think you raise a really valuable point, and that's where trying to adopt online training. The one thing we do know about crew, they can't put their cell phone down. So how do we turn that into a plus that if they're going to have their cell phone in their hand, that we're putting content in there that's useful?
Yeah, so I think so. First of all, obviously, we need to understand who we're talking about, who we're talking to, and then we need to understand when we think about education how this group of people consume information, how they want to. You know, and you look at your own social media now. If you're like me, a dinosaur that still uses Facebook. You know, the video clips. What are they? 10 seconds. Sorry. You know, these 10-second reels, we need to be the ones that change and move. We cannot expect the 23, 24-year-old deckhands to be adapting to us. So lots of the conversation today has come back to education. Is Steve Monk in the room? Where are you? There you are. I'm not anti in-person training at all. And I think a blended solution is the best solution because, as you say, there are things that you can only do in the classroom, with Blue Water, or on board, and that's super, super important. But obviously, it is limited. You can't have your own little board, Steve, who's there to do drills with you every week. So I think digital training is something that can really provide a really flexible solution for crew. And it's not just about compliance or regulatory training, although that is something that more and more can be covered. It's everything that you were mentioning around mental health, around leadership. It can be bespoke training that the yacht creates their own SOPs as training modules. You can have onboarding courses that set best practices and standards before crew arrive. I mean, it's really limitless in what you can do, but it needs to be delivered in a way that's engaging and meaningful for the crew that it's designed for. Otherwise, we're just ticking a box.
So, sort of kind of doing a follow-on is that rotation is affordable if you take the cost of replacing crew. So we can take almost onto the money question there. But the negative side of rotation is that the seafarer is only on board 6 months of a year, and they're missing out of another 6 months of training and sea service. So it's a double-edged sword. That's also another reason why I think everybody should consider digital training, because on your off time, that could be one of the requirements. You have to do X, Y, Z courses from home.
But if nobody requires it, why is crew going to do it if they're not required to do it?
Well, you know,
if we have off time,
right.
The last thing I want to do is spend weeks on end after I just came off a 6-month step charter of sitting there now.
Well, I think if you're on a true rotation, so let's say you're on 10 weeks on and 10 weeks off.
Yeah.
The way in which we're in the process, as Abby knows, of implementing it is at your annual review or whatever your review is, you're expected to do, let's say, 10 courses, online courses.
A lot of people are freelance, so really, I'm not required to, I'm not under contract. So
yeah, I think there's so many different scenarios, but to get back to who is advancing and who is standing still or who is not doing anything at all. It's a measure to say you are actually participating in our program and you're a valued person, or you're just collecting the paycheck and that's great. You can just carry on, serving cocktails, and we're not going to invest any more of our money and time into you because you're not investing it back. So I'm just putting that out as a possibility. Herb, I guess.
Just a quick raise of hands. I'm not even going to get into introducing myself. I'm doing a cocktail. Anybody wants to know who I am. How many people in this room at some point in their career have been involved in continuing education as part of a requirement for their license or certifications? Thank you. So you want to be on rotation?
that becomes part of your homework.
But it's also required.
Do your homework.
But we can't.
Yeah, or you don't get the job. You do the homework, or you don't get the benefit of being part of rotation.
But with that being said, there's captains out there that are lazy and don't require it and allow people to get on yachts and do that. And then, so people like me who do it and take my time to do it, it doesn't matter. So why?
Point made. And until there's a better vetting process to eliminate those kind of things from the system, what we're trying to do here is to create a system where those things are not the stalwarts of the system. They're not the stopgaps. We build things together, learning systems in person, online, through experience, through rotation, where there's crossover, so those aren't the problems anymore. That's what we're trying to do here. That's the outcome of what we want to walk away today with, is some solutions.
It's a valuable point, because it's something that frustrates me, is there's no consequences for the bad actors.
No.
And I like to believe that 99% of this industry is good actors. So how, instead of saying, well, what's the consequence for the bad actors, is what's the reward for the good actors? And I think that should be, you are a preferred crew member, vendor, manager for the insurance companies. You are a, you are recommended by the lead maritime attorneys. You are recognized by the flag states of having reached a standard, that not a minimum standard, a standard of excellence. So
because someone like us who does the work,
yes,
and works
well,
with
that's
exactly.
yeah.
Like, why should we?
So that goes back to the fact, my feeling that this is a very, very insecure business. This whole industry relies on the insecurity. You'll see it at the boat show here, this week. The brokers run around as, it starts at every level. And I'll just finish that train of thought, because we have some great questions. I like that. Is that I had Wayne Heisinger Sr., who was one of my absolute mentors in life. We were looking for a new captain, and we hired George Whitehouse, who's also a well-known person in this industry. And Wayne said to me, tell George to make a 5-year commitment as my captain. And I did. And George said, I'll make a 5-year commitment as long as Wayne makes a 5-year commitment to employ me. I went back to Wayne and said, that's the counter offer. He goes, no worries, I'll sell the yacht whenever I feel like it. So it's the owners that cause this insecurity. I think we should accept that, but also put it back to, Mr. Client, Mr. Custodian, you can't accuse us of being disloyal when in fact you as the custodian are the most disloyal actor in the room. So I'll just leave that as a train of thought out there.
Can I add to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So to answer her point, actually, I heard vetting between aviation and the marine industry. The big difference is in aviation, your actually training comes during company time. In the marine industry, you're expected to do it on your own time. So like she was saying is, you're here, you're working, you go, charter this, that, and then you have to go study. It should actually be done during company time.
Well, I will qualify that because my son is actually in the aviation industry, about to graduate from Embry-Riddle, which is a $200,000 investment before he earns his first job. So there is some other, but he does come out with the FAA certification that has some real meat on it. But
I just wanted to say that I'm a yacht manager. And I think the one thing that we really have benefited from is having crew placement within our services. And so I think, here's my crew placement specialist, Lucy. I think having that in daily interactions with crew, hearing what the owners want, hearing what the crew members are looking for, being able to consolidate all of that stuff. And as we touched on this morning, with contracts, being able to negotiate training time, being able to negotiate reimbursement for time. So as a yacht manager, I think we hear very clearly about the crew, because trust me, it's a big headache for us when we have to deal with crew turnover. So our incentive is to make sure that we keep the good crew on board and keep everybody happy. But we also have the ear of the owner. So if people are tired, if people are overworked and want to make a recommendation or do not feel safe about going anywhere, when it's too rough or it's too windy or things like that, as the manager, we are here to back them up. We're not here to fight crew. We're not here to do anything. So really,
we are kind of an ally on that front. And we do want to look after the crew members, but also, you know, the owner too, because everybody's, or the manager is going to hire to look after the asset ultimately. So, you know, to me, I think it can be a great win-win as long as people are listening, as long as people are communicating what the problems are. And like any industry, we have to evolve. And so I think that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you for that. Perfect. Quick rebut on that. So being a pilot since I was in high school, not every company pays for your pilot recertification, your training, everything else. It is sometimes, and there are yacht programs out there who do have training programs when crew members stay with it, and there's many of that don't. So I've never had a day paid of any of my training or either above. Yes, sir.
That was an AFP for 10 years.
See, it all depends. Who's paying for your kid's $200,000 at Embry?
Yeah, but that's a big deal.
You guys are.
Everybody. On rotation. So on 4 different occasions, I've worked in the oil field on a variety of everything from seismic gunboats to crew boats to walking divers to running commercial dive vessels and supply vessels. We had rotation all the time. It still goes on in the oil industry all the time. It goes on, I believe, in the maritime, in all the carriages, except for yachting, for the most part, and fishing to a certain extent. But that's a whole other thing. We don't even want to talk about fishing and things like that. So the simple fact of the matter is they have all gone through all the accident and risk analysis and realized that when you are giving people some time away from it, you're going to have less accidents. You're going to have higher retention. The numbers are out there. It's already been proven. 4 different companies I worked for in the Gulf of Mexico, they all did the figures. How much does it cost us to replace somebody who's been with the company for 30 days versus 60 to 90 days?
But that has nothing to do with freelance. We're talking about that.
Well, we're talking about people committed to industry as well. Freelancers are going to be freelancers. I send out independent as a contractor all the time myself.
But there's so many freelancers out there, and this has nothing, like, super yachting has to do with freelancers. So where is the safety and the wellness?
Do you want to know why there's so many freelancers out there? Because they don't want to tolerate living on board with the conditions that have been on board and the crew welfare that has been afforded. I want to just segue for a second. One of the biggest things I've seen throughout this have been taught by a few people. When it comes to decision making, and I advise crew, I advise captains, people moving up. You're going to make better decisions, the better your bank account looks. It's that easy. Anybody in here want to raise a hand and say that any decision making they've made, that if their bank account is really slim, they're going to make a different decision than if their bank account's fishing when it comes to career choice. Whether I'm going to be a yes captain or no captain, how's my bank account look? What are my house payments like? So I try to teach people and I tell them, get yourself financially secure, first of all. And that's what I try to help coach. And I work with company, I see other people setting up crew welfare by helping them establish financial stability. That will lead to better decision making all along.
So I think that, security, what does crew want? That's one that I've done in my research. Security is a big one. This idea that the boat's in the boat show this week, you could be out of a job a week from now for doing a really good job of making the boat look good. That is so upside down that, it just, and then instead of we got $500,000, $1 million more for the boat than I paid for it, we should reward that back to the crew. And so there's 1 week. What's the minimum amount of pay the crew and the severance? All of this is very upside down in my mind. Just to give Aaron a few minutes, because I know you're also used to the transaction side. I think that's a side that the crew get pushed towards the corner. And, by doing a good job, they actually do themselves out of a job.
No, I agree. Not exactly, but I actually, I think crew are very savvy. I think they've been all talking about. They all know they have certain rights in certain situations, and we receive a lot more calls than we, over the years from crew since the MLC has been in place. Mostly about severance. There's always a question like, what do I get? I'm in the boat, they don't pay me anything. Of course, they don't pay you anything. That's a problem because you're entitled for sure for your accrued wages. We actually had a call from the shop the other day saying I didn't get paid my wages, which is in this day and age, kind of unbelievable. There's actually owners that think they don't have to pay crew wages, but anyway, nonetheless, I wanted to take my time to ask this lady in the picture why it is she's, you know, part-time. I mean, I think that, you know, this is what I'm seeing a lot in my practice, that the owners are hiring a lot of these kind of crew, and it's, you know, because they can't get any other crew. Why won't you commit to a permanent job?
It's not worth it. What the owners want to offer or what the boat has to offer isn't worth it for me. Why would I want to commit to somebody who wants for me to be their servant, but yet can't take care of me on the backside of that? And I've been in this situation before, and I don't want to do it again. So I would rather be freelance and be able to pick and choose where I want to work, because it's better for me in the long run.
But speaking of picking and choosing, I mean, I am impressed with the idea that you are willing to do training. And don't you find captains and owners that also like that and would choose you over someone else?
So I've been with Kelly for the last probably a year now on training, but owners never ones that are asked about training. I've never sat down in any owner interview with an owner.
Are they hiring you?
Why would they listen to you?
Because they're not hiring you.
Why won't, why?
I do the training, but there's a lot of people out there that don't. I do it on my dime and my time. I don't know any of my clients that would say,
well, I've got some ideas on training. But
So there's something I want to point out. First of all, I want to give Abby kudos to mentioning that moving forward, we have Gen Z. That's who we're teaching. And prior to being a yacht captain, I was a chemistry professor, so teaching is one of my major fortes. And when I found myself lecturing in a hall of 300 students and they all had cell phones, and I thought I was going to make them change their ways, I said to myself, well, I can either try to change all 300 of them, or I can change my ways. This gets, so what I'm saying is, I was hitting the nail on the head. We have to teach to the new learning styles, to who's coming. It's not the way I learned. It's not the way the guys that are still in the industry that are 70 years old learned. It's how those people forthcoming learn and their learning styles. We need to adjust to them. The second thing that I want to say is this is a crew welfare forum, and there are 3 crew members in here. And I am so proud that I've got 3 squeaky wheels down there at the end.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think do we?
Yeah.
Where are
Maybe
they?
we should get
Where, you know, where are the crew members? Where's the crew? Raise your guys' hand. But so they're hiding. They must be scared. But seriously, how many crew members do we have in here besides my
We had her that just left. We had Lou that just left. We've got a captain right here. We've got 2, 3, 4. So, and a couple that have come and gone.
Yeah.
So there you are.
But
representing some.
But my point is, okay, so we have 7 crew members in this room, and we're talking about crew welfare. We need to find a way to attract more crew to these events, and we need to find a way to not argue with them and listen to what they have to say.
I think, if I can come in there, I think, you know, sorry, I'm the boarding regulator of the room, and I think I'm Gen X. Not Gen Z. I thought it was Gen Z, but Gen X. But the regulatory framework, you know, I think we have to discuss this. I mean, to speak to your point, Graham, about, you know, crew member, you know, doing their best to polish the boat to get it sold from under them. You know, there is protection under the law. You're indemnified from being unemployed arising from the sale of the vessel. You know, you're guaranteed wages. You have a seafarers won't leave for your wages automatically. You're guaranteed repatriation. You're guaranteed medical insurance, contract or otherwise. So, you know, I think to speak to Kelly's point in the very beginning, you know, the owner's office for sure, you know, they're working 9 to 5, they're getting paid leave, they're getting medical, they're getting, you know, you name it, they're getting it. And why aren't crew getting the same? Well, that's where the much lamented NRC came into force. Now I know it doesn't apply to private yachts, but a lot of those principles have filtered into private yachts, and a lot of crew are now afforded some of those protections. So I think, you know, I wouldn't want people to leave this room thinking that, there isn't an action, there isn't protection for crew when things go wrong. Unfortunately, as flag state, as a shipping master for the flag state, we only get involved when things do go wrong, and as Aaron said, people don't get paid, or people don't get medical treatment, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there are actions available, and one of the things that we do find, and I certainly find doing MLC inspections on board vessels, is there is a lack of awareness of the protections afforded.
Right, and that's something I want to touch on.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Tia Taylor. I am the yacht account manager for Nautical. I'm also the owner of Luxury Learning. I teach yacht crew yacht financial literacy. It's a beautiful combination to see both the budget being worked on with the owner and also talking to the crew every month about financial reports and everything. Everything in this industry comes down to money. End of story. So with crew welfare and crew benefit, crew retention, helping the owner, helping the crew, for me personally and talking to the crew directly, financial literacy. It starts off with, obviously crew want to be paid more, get them the leave that they want and everything else, and owners want to pay less. In all instances, we know that. But how can we have more retention, paying them correctly, them using their money correctly, wanting to stay on good programs with good captains, starts with financial literacy. Teaching the crew members what to do with their money, how to use it, seeing the benefits that they are getting, all the food, the uniforms, whatever, and also continuing on with a good program. All of this circles back to money.
I think that's an excellent point, and I want to grab your business card before the end of the day. I wish I'd known that when I was a crew member. It collected a lot of money out of me. That also goes to security, and I think that really comes down to security and insecurity. Conversely, I think that really the whole crew employment needs a revamp, because what we've been doing, we seem to just do the same thing year after year after year, and it's not getting any better. So, definition of insanity, right? But I do think that there is a opportunity to almost extradite the owner from the employment altogether and say that the crew are employed by X, and I could go into a shameless plug for my other company, which I'm not going to do, but that is where I think the future is where if you sign up for company X to supply the crew, then only you are signing up for this, and this, and that's part of the package, which includes rotation, vacation, medical, training, all those pieces, and that's the package, which is really what a lot of the airlines do. Just your point, and that's how they cover the cost of training. So I think there is an opportunity to do a revamp, but it's also that comes at a cost, to your point. But at the end of the day, if a bad crew experience is going to cause you to get out of yachting as the custodian, then why not spend the money? And I think it's really a change of attitude. Yachting is expensive. There is no budget yachting. You're in the wrong game, So maybe that's another takeaway. One other thing I want to talk about with the crew, the few that are in the room, because it does upset me. If this was a golf tournament, we'd have 300 crew. Because it's an educational tournament, we have 3. And there's also,
I don't know if that's fair.
and there's free beer at the end, so come on. But back me up on this one, So for the crew there is read your employment agreements, understand what you're signing. We see these come back to us all the time when there's a dispute. You go, you sign this, you go, and the criminal goes, but I didn't read it. Come on, do your bit, read it, and if you don't like it, negotiate it. It's not so. Maybe that's another course that needs to be trained. Negotiating, standing up for yourself. Certainly, leadership is a big one.
I mean, if I could give, I know lots of people have their hands up, but just one thing I really want to say, and maybe in Pink, I don't know your name, sorry, what's it? Amy. Thank you for raising this, Amy. I think, Graham, you're using the word security and insecurity a lot, but the word that comes to mind for me is isolation. And I think something that we could improve as an industry is to help crew feel less isolated. And that can be isolated as an individual or isolated on the boat that you're on. So often crew have said to me that they're in a crowded marina, but apart from late at night and a drunken exchange in the bar, there's no meaningful interaction. And, and I think more crew would be here. I think we do crew a disservice to say that they're only interested in the party. I think they would be here, but maybe we're not speaking to them. We're not inviting them. Maybe they don't know about it. Maybe we're not inviting in the right way. Maybe they don't think we'll listen. I don't know. But I think what you mentioned, I don't know, you're from Hill Robinson, Barrett, what you mentioned I think is really key, and I'd love to see this more and more in management companies. I think if crew can feel part of a fleet rather than part of an individual yacht, it also feels like more of a career, more options, more choices. And if you do pay for training on your own dime because you're on a boat that the owner doesn't necessarily, have big training ambitions for their crew, at least it could be for something, and you're taking that accreditation with you to the next job, and there's more security within that. So I like what you're saying around this concept of changing the employment structure, and I like just seeing more inclusion. But it's just translating that from this environment into the actual workplace. I don't know.
The crew training is fairly easy, and again, this is something we could standardize among management. Is that what I've seen work is the crew member pays for their training a year after successful completion. They bring all the receipts and they get reimbursed. Very simple systems so that basically the boat's paying, but if you leave before your year's up, you're not getting a dime back. So there are simple solutions in this, but I also think that adding more training modules, especially leadership, leadership and also identifying social issues, like we all go, hey, how you doing? Not how are you? Are you, really looking out? Are you, you've been really quiet the last couple of days. What's going on? Training in that, I think, would be really, really valuable. But I'm not aware of those courses. So we got a lot of questions. I'm going to.
Mine's really quick. We do these seminars when it's convenient for us as an industry because we're all here. We don't do it when it's convenient for the crew. The crew will not come to a seminar during or around a boat show because they're prepping a boat, because they're in the show for a reason. If we hold this seminar a month outside of the boat show when the marinas are still full, or seminars, whether it's at LMC or Rybovich, and concentrate on the crew when it's more convenient for them, we'll get more crew members to these seminars. This is great because we're all flown in from all over the world, but you're not going to get the crew off the boat during the boat show.
All right, one quick question. So how many yacht brokers are here? Okay, so the crew beat the yacht brokers.
Maybe there's a quick answer to this one, but just to finish off the last couple points that were made, is there a success story by a yacht manager here in the room where they signed a 5-year contract with a crew member that was not an SCA for a specific yacht, but for our company, for our fleet of yachts? So the crew member could be moved from yacht to yacht if it was a round peg and a square hole. A crew member can get training and they're guaranteed time off and a decent quality of life for 5 years. Because you said you had the crew member that wanted to do it, but you couldn't find an owner that wanted to commit for 5 years.
I don't think you're going to get a yes to that in today's group, but I have. I will be able to answer yes to that shortly. Okay.
Hi, it's me again. So first of all, Kelly, your crew members who are down there, thank you for coming, for sure. And also, just to the point of, when somebody works freelance, it's not a part-time job. It is sometimes because they choose a lifestyle, so they can have a life and have a family and have whatever. So freelance works with however their schedule is. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we're talking about crew awareness, and all I'm hearing everybody talking about is the contracts. Like, that's everyone talking about training and contracts, training, contracts. You briefly mentioned, Abby, the point of mental health, because this is isolating. And unfortunately, I just knew a young man who took his life. He was 20 years old and he's been in the industry for 1 year. And I had no idea. He wasn't one of my crew members. He was someone I knew, and he corresponded with me regularly. But go out there and talk to your crew, for God's sakes. Like you were just saying, not how you doing today, or how are you really doing today? And I almost feel like there needs to be, not that we need more training for captains, but something like a mental health officer on board. Not someone who is trained in necessarily being a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but someone who can see that there's an issue, a safe place for the crew members to go to. I sent you guys an email on this. It's like, if we think this is an insurmountable task, I have medical person in charge training. Herb, you have that, right? How long, I mean, we have to know how to do compound fractures, catheters, administer hard narcotics. Like, we have to do everything.
And assess mental health.
And assess mental health. But we're so busy doing other things, so why is there not somebody on board who can just say, I'm seeing something that doesn't look right, let's see if we can find a resource close by and get some help for you.
I think at a very minimum, every yacht should have, the crew should have free access to someone they can speak to, whether, you know, it's a Zoom call or whatever, because it may not be appropriate on board the yacht. But I think that should be an absolute minimum for every single yacht in my.
I just hope that everybody comes to my mental health and yachting seminar tomorrow, because it's going to answer a lot of this. But when you say, that's a really good idea, Wendy, about having a mental health officer on board, but I also want to say it's a culture. And the way that I am on my boat is I'm an open book. You know, I have no shame in telling anyone that there was a point in my life that I didn't want to be upright on this planet anymore. And I think sharing that, I've had my own struggles. And listen, even when I get in a funk on the boat or I'm frustrated, like, we're a little family down there. We're missing a couple of them. I don't have everybody down there, but we're a family, and I check in with them, they check in with me. There was an instance when I just had so much going on and was just thinking about my schedule, and one of my crew members didn't show up for work one day, and I was mad as hell. One of my other crew members stood up and said, wait, let's ask what's going on. Sure enough, there was. So we sat down on the couch in the master stateroom, and we cried together, and we shared our stories together. So there doesn't just have to be one mental health officer on board. Why isn't everybody a mental health officer on board and watching out for each other?
And I think that is something I've experienced as a yacht manager, that the captains reach out to us, because even though they may be able to provide that to the crew, who provides that to the captain?
You know, and someone asked me that the other day. I did a podcast with Burgess, and they said, well, who do you go to, Kelly? And I said, well, that's a good question. And I thought about it, and I was like, I talk to my crew. You know, some older leadership styles may say that that's wrong, but I think the fact that I am willing to expose myself to them and be vulnerable to them allows them to do the same in return, and is which is why we're so close.
Could you hand your mic over to Herb?
I did have something.
Need a microphone. How many of you have seen the paper that got sent out? I don't know how many times, called Fatigue and Captaincy? Not one. I've sent it out to a number of members. Brendan O'Shaughnessy and a group of captains many years ago got together and wrote that paper. And let me tell you, one of the things in the email that is that we hesitated real hard after a bunch of captains getting together, sending out that paper called Fatigue and Captaincy. That goes directly to this whole issue, and where does that go to? Where's that next step? That was a set of questions. Anybody wants to give me their card, I'll gladly send that paper. That was by the Bridge Committee, ISS, another great ISS committee, and they put out another paper after that called Are You Okay? Which was how to ask your crew questions. Are you okay? Teaching them how to ask questions and interact with that. And one thing that I'm going to point out here again is back to vetting. Corrine Grayson, wonderful gal who got out of the industry, she's crew coach, she's really she's there for so many people who want to be there as well. But the simple fact of the matter is life on board is very similar to life in a penal colony. Like it or not. You get a set of rules, you get hard rules with hard consequences. You don't get to make a lot of your own choices. You don't get to pick your hairstyles sometimes. You don't get to pick what you're going to be wearing as far as jewelry. You don't get to pick your uniforms. So yeah, is it a life for everybody? No, but we're sure letting everybody in through the floodgates without vetting them. And I'm sorry, not everybody, as we said in aviation, gets to be the pilot. Some people just going to have to drive submarines and drive boats. And when we start putting up a little bit more of a security and vetting process and who gets to come out here in one of the more demanding, psychologically demanding jobs out there, and that's being a full-time yacht crew and not having a whole lot of out to say on your daily life, then we're going to have probably a little bit better mental health going forward because we're going to be a lot more aware, as opposed to, let me tell you, I've found plenty of them crying in the closet. And the last couple of years, what has come across, I've now added, do you have your wisdom teeth or have you had them taken out? Seriously, because it cost my last employer $6,500 because she didn't tell me her wisdom teeth hadn't grown in. Anyway, enough on that one.
I mean, I'm not quite sure what the wisdom teeth means. Does that mean you have less wisdom or more wisdom once you have them taken out? Or is that a health issue?
We're wiser to make sure they're either out or they're grown in.
Okay, well, you know,
that's how young we're hired.
You know, crew issues has been my entire life, professionally, personally, from when I worked on yachts. And we had seminars before, Kelly, when we did a seminar on crew welfare in Monaco last fall. We had about 200 people in the room. Over half of them were yacht crew. Big uptake. I don't know if that was easier. I also made sure that I peppered the audience with owners that were willing to get up there and give their honest opinion, and that was incredibly insightful. But you know, I feel like we're having this discussion from a basis of negativity. We're all saying, well, this is a problem, and we've seen that happen, and you know, in the contracts and the da-da-da-da-da. The reality is that this is an industry that is meant to be enjoyable for the owners, and also the only reason why you would allow yourself to be dehumanized and join a penal colony voluntarily is because it does have positive aspects. And I really think it's important for all of us to also think about the things that we can do on board to make the life of the crew as well as the owners more positive. And there's all kinds of things that you can do. You know, it used to be that you'd go play a game of volleyball to make sure that you've got your team spirit. I know that there's captains that take their crew doing whitewater rafting and all kinds of different things. Maybe you have a vessel and an owner and a crew that's a little bit more serious. In today's world, we're all thinking about the environment, about conservation, about what we're doing to Mother Ocean. So, you know, I'd like to put it out there. If you're looking for something really positive to do, I work with the International Seakeepers Society. We have a whole raft of programs that can be personalized to a vessel, that can be done with individuals, where owners can be made to feel that they're a part of this entire beautiful environment that we're also fortunate to work in. That I think at the end of the day, despite negative commentary, I really believe that all of us want to work in this industry and want it to continue, because I spent 40 years of my life in it, and I can tell you, I don't think there's anything better. I certainly have no plans to do anything else with my life. And considering the long-term career opportunities in yachting, I don't know why anybody else would leave, because it's one of the few business environments where you can still make a difference and you can still chart your own course and do the things that you want to do. So, you know, I suggest that we all think about the things that we can do to make our yachting experience more positive, contributing to the environment around us, working together with our crew people, talking with them in a way in which we can actually share what's important to us, our joys, our accomplishments, and what it is that we want out of yachting. We're all individuals. Graham, you're absolutely right. Read your contracts. I love the financial literacy. I think that's so fantastic. Someone that goes out of her way to get her training that's not necessary, brava. There needs to be more of that, but please you know, let's look at solutions. Let's not just look at all of the problems that we potentially have. I'm going to turn it back over to Graham so that he can clear up. And Graham, once you're done, then we'll say a couple of things about ISS, and I'll go continue this discussion over cocktails.
I've got one more question and then
insurance back to that mental health for yacht crews, completely free. It's called www.yachtcrewhelp.com. It's a mental health resource 24/7. So you share that with your colleagues. If they need help, they can reach out to this contact, and it's free.
thank you. So in wrapping it up, I think we did, takeaways are important. Certainly the security, the training, the wanting a real career for crew. Old farts like me listening to young crew and learning. That's my absolute takeaway. But I'm not too old to learn, so I'm all ears. That I think one of the other things that's really changed since I got into the industry is that there is a life after yachting once you decide that you no longer want to be a liveaboard crew member. And a lot of us have had that opportunity. Certainly it's been good to me. So that crewing doesn't have to be the end game. You can do your time on board and then move on to the next sector. There certainly is an infinite amount of jobs available ashore for crew that can bring that knowledge to shore with them too. So I think that's another change that wasn't available as recently as 5 years ago. So there is a real career for crew. I think if we can get that word out, yes, some people in the nomadic phase of their life, yes, they want to earn $20,000 and then go travel around Bali. That's probably not the sector that we're talking to today. But anybody that wants to make this a career, bring it on. We can do things with you. So on that note, we have Cayman Registry is invited us all for cocktails. And Mare Forum, so we can continue this informally or as you please. But thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you very much for attending. We've enjoyed it. I hope everybody learned something. We also want to just remind you also that we have an event tomorrow night. So we hope that you're going to join us at our cocktail event tomorrow. And I think Norma wanted to say a few more things, but I just wanted to thank you all very much for attending today. We hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to congratulate Erin Ackor again on being our new president. She's already doing some great things. I myself also worked on a book on and off for 12 years. So I became a lawyer. I'm now the president of the ISS. So for you young crew members over there, there's a lot of us that worked on books. Well, there's more people in the business of yachting than there are working on board, and I'm another great example of that. I've had 3 decades in the business of yachting after a decade working on board. And I have to say it's been really challenging and rewarding and fantastic. And again, one of the best reasons for being able to have such a long and interesting and fruitful career has been my participation with various organizations, but with our organizing group here, the International Super Yacht Society. That is one way in which you can affect change. You can meet the business leaders. And I'd just like to leave you with one last thing, which is that all of our awards are coming up, whether they're yacht awards or the awards of distinction, which recognize the people of yachting. So I'd really like you to think about who you think is worthy of recognition. And please, when we have those events, when we're doing education, whether it's here, whether we're doing our award ceremonies, which happen in Fort Lauderdale, the big gala, participate, think about it, recognize the people that you think deserve recognition, because there's a lot of them out there, and we all have a long way to go in this business. So thank you very much for participating, and let's go have a drink.